Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story. The contract, the grandfather clock in the corner of the notary's office seemed to mock Olivia with each tick. 20 years old, sitting in a leather chair that smelled of old money and older secrets. She clutched the inheritance letter. That would change everything. "Miss Anderson," Mr. Halbert said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your grandfather's will is quite specific. The estate, including the Chestnut Street property and educational trust, passes to you on one condition." Olivia's heart hammered. Against her ribs? What condition? You must be legally married to a man of good standing before your 21st birthday. Otherwise, everything reverts to the Anderson Foundation. The words hit her like ice water. Married? I'm a law student. I don't even have a boyfriend. Halbert's expression remained neutral. Your grandfather believed in protection through partnership. You have 8 months. 8 months to find someone, fall in love, and marry. The impossibility of it made her stomach turn. She needed that inheritance. The house held every memory of her late mother, and the trust fund was her only way to finish Harvard Law. 3 days later, a messenger delivered an embossed letter to her dormitory. Inside was an appointment with Judge Ethan Callahan, the estate's executor. She knew his reputation: brilliant, unwavering, and completely untouchable. His Beacon Hill mansion loomed before her like a fortress. When the door opened, she expected a housekeeper, but instead found herself face to face with Ethan himself. Tall, dark-haired, with steel blue eyes that seemed to see through everything. "Miss Anderson, please, come in." His library was all dark wood and leather-bound silence. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, maintaining a careful distance. "I understand your predicament," he said without preamble, "and I have a proposal." Her pulse quickened. "What kind of proposal?" "A marriage of convenience. Legal. Temporary and purely contractual. You fulfill the will's requirements, gain your inheritance, and we dissolve the arrangement after a suitable period." She stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "I knew your grandfather. He was a good man who made a questionable decision. I won't let his stubbornness destroy your future." It's the offer. Hung between them like a lifeline, and a trap rolled into one. She studied his face, noting the careful control. The way he held himself like a man who had learned not to expect softness from the world. "I'll need time to think," she said finally. He nodded once. "You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires." As she left his mansion, Olivia felt the weight of an impossible choice. Marry a stranger for her inheritance, or lose everything? Her family had built. The decision, she realized, had already been made the moment she walked through his door. The arrangement. Olivia returned to the Callahan mansion exactly 47 hours later. This time, she noticed details that had escaped her before: the fresh white peonies in the hallway, the way sunlight caught the crystal chandelier, the subtle scent of cedar and something warmer she couldn't identify. Ethan waited in the same library, but today he seemed different, less guarded perhaps, or maybe she was seeing him with clearer eyes. "I accept," she said without sitting down. He nodded as if he'd expected nothing else. "To sign boundaries to establish. This arrangement protects both of us." "What are your terms?" "Simple. We marry within the month. You live here until the inheritance is secure. After 1 year, we divorce quietly. No emotional entanglements, no complications." Almost laughed at the clinical way he described it. "And what do you get out of this?" The first time, his composure flickered. "The satisfaction of honoring a good man's memory, even if I disagree with his methods." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the downtown registry office. No flowers, no guests, just two people speaking vows that felt more like business negotiations. When the judge asked them to seal the ceremony with a kiss, Ethan hesitated for just a moment before pressing his lips to hers. It was brief, formal, and yet something sparked between them that neither had expected. Moving into the Callahan estate felt like stepping into a museum. Her suite was beautiful, but isolated, tucked away in the east wing. Mrs. Alcott, the housekeeper, was kind but distant. Everything was perfect, sterile, and utterly lonely. Ethan maintained his distance religiously. He left early for court, returned late, and they rarely spoke beyond polite inquiries about schedules and weather. Their marriage was a contract, nothing more. But small things began to change. Law books appeared on her desk, carefully annotated in Ethan's precise handwriting. A cup of chamomile tea waited on her windowsill each evening. When she mentioned loving peonies during one of their rare conversations, fresh arrangements appeared in her suite the next day. One evening she found him reading in the library, his usual armor of formality slightly loosened. They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their books, and for the first time since moving in, the house didn't feel quite so empty. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. He looked up from his pages. "Regret what? This life? All this space? All this silence?" His eyes held hers for a long moment. "I've never known anything else to regret." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and it broke something open in her chest. Here was a man who had built walls so high, he'd forgotten what it felt like to want them torn down. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," she whispered. He closed his book slowly. "Perhaps. But it's also the safest." As she watched him leave the library, Olivia realized she was no longer just fulfilling a contract. She was beginning to care about the man behind the arrangement, and that changed everything. The cracks 3 months into their arrangement. The careful distance between Olivia and Ethan began to fracture in small, significant ways. It started with dinner. Instead of eating separately as they had since the wedding, Ethan began waiting for her to return from classes. Their conversations grew longer, moving beyond weather and schedules to books, legal philosophy, and her dreams of practicing family law. "You want to help people," he observed one evening, watching her describe a particularly challenging case study. "Is that so surprising?" "Not surprising. Admirable." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've forgotten what that feels like." She studied his face across the candlelight. "What made you become a judge?" "Control." The answer came without hesitation. "In the courtroom, everything has rules. Order, consequences that make sense, and outside the courtroom." His smile was hollow, chaos, which is why I prefer to stay inside. But the walls he'd built were showing cracks. She saw it in the way. He lingered after their conversations, in how he'd started joining her morning coffee instead of leaving immediately for court. Most tellingly, she caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. The night everything changed, Boston was drowning in a late spring storm. Olivia found Ethan standing at the library window, scotch in hand, staring out. "At the rain-lashed garden, couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. He turned, and she saw something raw in his expression. "I keep thinking about what you said about regret." And I lied. He set down his glass with deliberate care. "I do regret things, more than I've ever allowed myself to admit." Lightning illuminated his face, and in that moment, she saw past every barrier he'd constructed. Here was a man who had spent so long protecting himself that he'd forgotten how to live. "What do you regret most?" she whispered. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible above the thunder. "That I never learned how to let someone matter." The words hung between them like a confession. Without thinking, she stepped closer, close enough to see the storm reflected in his eyes. "It's not too late," she said. "Isn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I'm 35 years old, Olivia. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this. This, feeling something real for someone who deserves better than a man who doesn't know how to love." Her heart stopped. "Ethan, I know what this is supposed to be. A contract, a convenience. But somewhere along the way, it became something else, and I don't know how to handle that." She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. "Then don't. Handle it. Just feel it." For a moment she thought he might kiss her. really kiss her. This time, not the careful brush of lips from their wedding day. But instead, he stepped back, the walls slamming back into place. "I can't give you what you want," he said, his voice steady again. "I won't destroy something beautiful just because I'm too damaged to appreciate it properly." "That's not your choice to make," she said, but he was already walking away. "It's the only choice I know how to make." She stood alone in the library, listening to his footsteps fade into the vast silence of the house, and realized that somewhere in the space between contract and convenience, she had fallen in love with her husband. The question was whether he would let himself love her back. The truth, the morning after the storm, Ethan was gone before sunrise. Didn't come home for dinner, or the next night, or the one after that. When he finally appeared 3 days later, the careful politeness had returned, but now it felt like ice. Olivia tried to pretend it didn't hurt, but the house felt even more cavernous without his presence. She threw herself into her studies, spent long hours at the library, and avoided the east wing where his study light burned late into the night. It was Mrs. Alcott who finally broke the silence. "He's afraid, the housekeeper said one afternoon, setting down tea and homemade scones. "Never seen him like this before." "Like what?" "Vulnerable. In all my years working for him, I've never seen him let anyone close enough to matter." Olivia's chest tightened. "I'm not trying to hurt him, I know, dear. But hurt and healing sometimes look the same to someone who's forgotten the difference." That evening, Olivia found a manila envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter in Ethan's precise handwriting, along with legal documents she recognized. Immediately, divorce papers. Her hands shook as she read his words. "Olivia, your inheritance has been finalized. You are now the legal owner of the Chestnut Street property and educational trust. The terms of your grandfathers will have been satisfied. I believe it's time we ended this arrangement as planned. The attached documents require only your signature. I've taken the liberty of arranging for a clean, quiet dissolution that will protect both our reputations. You deserve a real marriage with someone capable of giving you the love you deserve. I am not that man, Ethan." She stared at the papers until the words blurred, and she did something that surprised even her. She tore them in half. If Ethan wanted to end their marriage, he would have to look her in the eye and tell her why. We found him in his study at midnight, bent over legal briefs, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie discarded. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "You tore up the papers," he said. "It wasn't a question. I did. Olivia, this is for the best. We both know this was always temporary, was it?" She moved closer, her heart hammering, because it stopped. "Feeling temporary to me months ago." He stood, putting the desk between them like a shield. "You're confusing gratitude with something else. Don't tell me what I'm feeling." Her voice was steady, despite the storm in her chest. "I'm 21 years old, Ethan, not a child. I know the difference between gratitude and love." The word hung between them like a challenge. He flinched as if she'd struck him. "Love," he repeated hollowly. "Do you know what my childhood was like? My parents were brilliant, successful, and completely incapable of affection. I learned early that emotions were weaknesses to be controlled, not feelings to be shared. That's not love, that's performance. It's all I know." The words exploded from him with surprising force. "I've spent my entire life building walls because the alternative terrified me. And then you walked into my house with your stubborn courage and your impossible hope, and you made me want things I swore I'd never want." She stepped around the desk, closing the distance between them. "Like what?" "Like mornings that don't feel empty, like someone to share the silence with, like a future that doesn't look exactly like the past." His voice cracked. "Like being the kind of man who deserves to be loved by someone like you?" "You already are that man," she whispered. "You just have to let yourself believe it." This time, when she reached for him, he didn't pull away. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek with infinite tenderness. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "So am I, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else." And finally, he kissed her, the way she'd been dreaming of since their wedding day, like a man who had found something worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. When they broke apart, both breathless, He rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words rusty from disuse but absolutely true. "I love you, and I don't know how to do this, but I want to learn. We'll figure it out together." She promised, and for the first time since moving into the Callahan mansion, it truly felt like home. The beginning 1 year later, Olivia stood in the same library where their marriage had begun as a contract and transformed into something real. But this time, she wasn't alone. Ethan was beside her, his arm around her waist, both of them watching. The garden, where their first real wedding was taking place. It had been his idea to renew their vows, to start fresh with words that meant something this time. Small ceremony with just Mrs. Alcott as witness, surrounded by the white peonies. That had become their symbol of new beginnings. "Nervous?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "About marrying you again?" "Never." She turned in his arms, marveling at how natural it felt now. This closeness that had once seemed impossible. "About you changing your mind?" "Also never." He laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. The man who had once rationed his smiles now gave them freely, and each one still made her heart skip. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a simple gold band, engraved with words she recognized from one of their late-night conversations, "Choose courage over comfort." "It's what you taught me," he said, sliding it onto her finger beside the practical wedding band from their first ceremony. "Every day I choose to be brave enough to love you. I choose to be brave enough to let you," she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. Their second wedding was everything their first had not been, joyful, meaningful, and completely theirs. When the minister asked them to seal their union with a kiss, Ethan didn't hesitate. His lips found hers with the confidence of a man who had learned that love was not a weakness to be conquered, but a strength to be shared. Later, as they sat in the garden sharing champagne and Mrs. Alcott's famous lemon cake, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A contract marriage had become a real partnership. A house had become a home. And two people who had thought they understood what they wanted from life had discovered something infinitely better than their careful plans. "Do you regret it?" she asked, echoing the question that had started their real conversation all those months ago. "Marrying you the first time or the second time?" "They're both." The whole messy, complicated, wonderful thing. Ethan set down his champagne and took her hands in his thumbs tracing over her rings. "I regret that it took me so long to realize what I had. I regret every day I wasted being afraid. But marry you? Love you? Choose this life with you?" He shook his head. "Never. Not for a single second." "Good," she said, settling against his side as the sun set over their garden. "Because I'm planning to keep you for a very long time." "It's a long time," he teased. "Forever," she corrected. "I'm planning to keep you forever." "Perfect," he said, his voice warm with promise. "Because forever is exactly how long I plan to love you." As the stars emerged overhead, they sat in comfortable silence. No longer two people bound by contract, but two hearts who had chosen each other completely. The grandfather clock in the house chimed the hour, but this time its sound wasn't a countdown. Two obligation fulfilled, but a celebration of a love that had grown beyond all expectations. Their story had begun with a will and a deadline, but it would continue with choice and commitment, day after day, year after year. And in the end, that made all the difference. The end.